short of a large-scale, long-term operation, you can expand the operation under this authorization.
Well, what we have...
The language is fuzzy, is it not?
Intentionally so. And the intent
intentionally
is...
so. The
yes.
language is intentionally fuzzy.
Yes, Jim, because we believe it's important that there aren't overly burdensome constraints that are placed on the commander-in-chief, who needs the flexibility to be able to respond to contingencies that emerge in a chaotic military conflict like this.
Alongside Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth welcoming you into Hour 2 of America's Forum for this Friday. We just heard White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest saying that President Obama's request to Congress to use military force in the fight against ISIS is intentionally fuzzy to allow our commander-in-chief more latitude.
It's an interesting way to phrase it.
Yeah, fuzzy. Well,
fuzzy.
A guy who always has a crystal clear view of things is former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. He's here to go in depth. Fuzzy. Governor, in the first place, why do we need a new resolution of force? Doesn't the one that Congress voted on years ago, isn't that still operative, whomever is the commander-in-chief?
Well, I think, J.D., it may be. I think this, of course, goes to the constitutional debate that's going on right now. The Congress is asserting itself much more in foreign policy, which I think is good, because that makes it more likely that the American people will get behind the foreign policy if we had one. I think the real challenge we're facing right now is the president is asking for some authority. He's keeping it fuzzy so that he has flexibility, but we don't know what he's going to do, and I don't think he does either. So I think that what the real challenge we're facing right now is less a congressional authorization than a sense of direction, forcefulness, involvement in the world affairs, the role that America should play and will play in the 21st century.
And Governor, this is what House Speaker John Boehner had to say about the president's proposal. Let's listen to what he had to say. We'll get to that in just a second, and as soon as we do, we want to get your reaction on it. And you know what, while we're looking for that, why don't I go ahead and just read what House Speaker John Boehner said. He said, I want to give our military commanders the flexibility and the authority that they need to defeat our enemies. Let's listen. Do we have it? Okay, we do have it. So let's listen to what Boehner had to say in his own words.
I want to give our military commanders the flexibility and the authority that they need to defeat our enemies. And the White House readily admits that the authorization that they're seeking is more restrictive than what they already have in place. If we're going to defeat our enemy and win this fight, we need a strong, robust strategy and a strong, robust authorization.
So Governor, do you agree with what Boehner said? Do we need a robust strategy or something that's intentionally fuzzy?
First of all, I think that we do need a robust authority. I think that the president does have to have the ability on the battlefield and in this ongoing world conflict to be able to react. I think there's nothing wrong with congressional oversight. By Speaker Boehner, by saying this today, he is providing oversight and a sense of direction as to our foreign policy, and I think that's fine. So I think that we need to strike the balance. But the interesting thing I'm seeing right now is that the president seems to be coming in and trying to restrict his own authority. And that's kind of strange. It makes me wonder whether he's trying to restrict the authority of the next president also.
Well, Governor, we spoke earlier about the presidential press secretary's use of the word fuzzy. You've been critical of the president for using the term random when it came to that attack on the kosher supermarket in Paris. Can you expound upon your criticism of the president, the use of his word random in that attack?
Well, I can. Let me make one overarching, very key point here, J.D. The president seems to me to be casual and sloppy in the things that he says, because I think his mind is sloppy on foreign policy. I don't think he has a clear idea about what he's trying to do. He needs to understand that when the president of the United States speaks on foreign policy issues, the world reacts and listens very closely. So he has to be more careful about what he's trying to say. So when he says that an attack on a kosher market in Paris is random, he's not right. This is a direct attack on the Jewish community in France and, in fact, worldwide. And I spoke to people in New York just the other day about this, and I think they're very insecure because of that attack. And I want to say now in crystal clear language that if the people of the Jewish community in France want to leave France because they're insecure, they should be welcome in the United States of America with the rest of the Jewish community in the United States of America. because we are the leaders of the free world. We are the people that stand with our allies worldwide, and we can't allow people to be intimidated. So that's my position. If they want to leave France, they ought to come to the United States of America. We would welcome them. Now, the other problem, of course, is that this is just going on all the time with the president. He uses sloppy language about the Crusades, which I thought was unforgivable in terms of a national leader. He says this random thing about Paris, and I think that his reaction to Paris was totally wrong.
Speaking of that, Governor Jim Gilmore, we want to continue getting your thoughts following this break. Stay with us. There's more ahead on America's Forum.
Much research points to the widespread existence of unconscious bias. Many people in our white majority culture have unconscious racial biases and react differently to a white face than a black face. With the death of Michael Brown in Ferguson, the death of Eric Garner in Staten Island, and the ongoing protests throughout the country, and the assassinations of NYPD officers Wen Junlu and Rafael Ramos, we are at a crossroads.
FBI Director James Comey delivering a speech on race relations at Georgetown University.
Yeah, Comey saying the nation is at a crossroads, as you just heard, following the killings of unarmed black men by police officers and the murders of 2 New York police officers that subsequently followed.
Let's continue our conversation now with former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. Jim, I don't mean to be flippant, but when I hear the FBI director giving a speech themed in this manner, it almost seems as if he's sending a rhetorical Valentine as a departing gift to Eric Holder, who's about to leave the Justice Department. You'll recall General Holder said that America is, quote, a nation of cowards when it comes to discussing race.
Well, I'm certainly not a coward. When I was the Attorney General of Virginia, we saw black African-American churches being burned all across the South, and I convened all my fellow Attorney Generals across the entire South, Republicans and Democrats. Former Governor Wilder, who was the first African-American governor, came into the conference at my invitation, and we issued a strong statement that said the law would be enforced. The law would be enforced, and then that kind of attacks on African-American churches stopped. So I've always been a person that believes that in the rule of law in the United States. I think the challenge we're facing right now is to make sure that all communities are protected by the enforcement of the rule of law in the United States. And I think that the interpretation of that and the view of what the law is doing in the United States from the different communities is a challenge in the United States. It's perfectly reasonable to talk about it.
You say it's a challenge, so what do you think needs to be done to help overcome some of the incidents that have happened now so we can actually progress and move forward?
Well, I think that, first of all, policing has got to be understood in various communities, like Ferguson, for example, and not put people into a position of being misinterpreted. But I also believe that the police and the authorities who hire the police, the mayors and city council people across the United States, have to strongly assert that the law must be followed by everybody. We can't have a chaotic situation in the United States. We have to look to law enforcement people, but I do think we have to work harder to make sure that all communities have faith and confidence in the law enforcement community. And I think that means in this society we've created right now that having African American policemen involved in law enforcement is a very positive thing.
Governor, there are not only divisions in the nation along racial lines, there are also differences in the beliefs we hold. A story to the south of Virginia, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, the murder of 3 Muslims there in Chapel Hill. The wife of the attacker said it was not based on beliefs. It had to do with a parking dispute. But the father of one of those victims had this to say. Let's listen in and get your reaction.
I want to say one more thing. With the media bombarding every American every day with news about what they call Islamic terrorism, none of which is Islamic at all, they're really preparing people for such tragedies and triggering them and provoking them.
He's suggesting use of the term Islamic terror provokes crimes against Muslims. Do you agree with that assessment?
Whew, this is a really complicated. I've got several things to say. First of all, we should not hesitate to call Islamic terrorism Islamic terrorism. If people in ISIS are advertising and using modern communications abilities to behead people and show all this on video, to burn up pilots in cages and show that on video, we have a right to react to that and say that that's wrong. That doesn't mean, however, we project that onto people of the Islamic faith here in the United States. I know plenty of people and plenty of people who supported me politically out of the Islamic community, but I also want to put a burden on them. They have a duty at this point to stand up and say, well, if Islamism does not stand for these things that are going on, they should be very vocal and say so. If they're quiet about it, then they imply that maybe ISIS is okay. I think the Islamists in the United States of America have an obligation to stand up for their faith and for the people in their community and denounce in the strongest possible terms this kind of world challenge that we're facing out of the Middle East.
Jim, 15 seconds. The FBI has gotten involved in that investigation in Chapel Hill. Is that a good thing?
Frankly, I come out of the law enforcement community. I was a local elected prosecutor. I work with local police. I think they're perfectly competent to determine whether this was a parking dispute or some kind of Islamic attack on Islamists. I don't know that you need the FBI involved with this.
And on that note, we will thank you, former Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. Turn our attentions to heart and health next.